You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCBN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Welcome once again to the Conor McGregor Show. All things Conor McGregor all the time. Peter, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm doing alright. This is the first night in a while there's no hockey, but, I think, Stevie, you're pretty happy the Blackhawks were eliminated.
Yes, indeed. It took 7 games, but the Blues finally knocked them out.
Kind of weird to say there's no playoff hockey now for the Blackhawks, the Kings, the Red Wings. You know what I mean? Some big name players and teams are out, which is, in a way, good because those star players will get some rest before the World Cup. And when I talk about world competition, there's some talk, very small talk right now, but do you ever think we'll get like an Olympic MMA competition going on in the future?
No. That's been bandied about in the past, and it's not going to work because professional MMA fighters and even amateur MMA fighters need months and months to get ready to train for one fight, and you're going to expect them to go through what would essentially be a Bellator tournament at the Olympic level? That's not going to work.
Oh, you could have like a preliminary tournament and have like maybe the semifinals and the finals.
Well, on top of the fact that just the structure of it is not going to work when they have to take multiple fights in a short amount of time, you're also going to deal with the problem of getting all these different sanctioning bodies to agree to an Olympic level of MMA rules and regulation. Like, are soccer kicks allowed or not? Are elbows allowed or not? All these things that have already been decided by each individual commission or each individual country would have to be debated all over again. It's not going to happen.
The reason I bring this up is because, the heat is starting to rise now for the Olympics coming up in Rio. And a Brazilian Olympics, just the appeal of having, MMA in Rio, you know what I mean? Like,
I know, but you know what? If they want to put on an exhibition and have like a jiu-jitsu tournament as part of the Olympics, then do that. And wrestling is already a part of the Olympics, so do that. Do you really need mixed martial arts? At the end of the day, it's what people do after their wrestling career is over, after their Olympic dreams are over. That's when people take that wrestling base and add kickboxing and jiu-jitsu and all the other disciplines, and then they become mixed martial artists. So you don't really need to have MMA at the Olympics because MMA is what you do after the Olympics.
True. Now, let's transition to Conor McGregor because after the show ended, the story flipped 180 degrees and then went 180 degrees again to vaguely steal a line from someone in the past.
Yeah, Macho Man, I believe, is who you're channeling there.
Yeah. Why don't you break down what happened after we left the air last week?
Oh, this is so much fun. So much drama in the LBC. It's kind of hard when you're the notorious Conor McGregor, don't you see? Because he kept claiming he was willing to fight. He wanted to fight. He would be on the fight. He even offered the concession of, I'll come to New York, I'll do the press event there, but I won't do anything else. And Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta, and UFC weren't having that. They're like, no, you're going to do all the press or you're not on the card. And they kept going back and forth in social media and on various different media outlets. And then it got even stranger when Conor claimed that he was still training for the show and he was still on the show. And Dana White said, no, you're not. And then they held the press conference and they talked about getting a new opponent for Nate Diaz. And apparently nobody clued in Nate Diaz. He said, if I'm not fighting Conor, I'm going on vacation. To heck with this. And so nobody's on the same page. Then to make it even more interesting, Conor tries an end-around play where he thinks he can trick everybody into giving him what he wants by saying, so happy that UFC, Lorenzo Fertitta, and Dana White got this done for the fans. Hashtag respect. Yeah, they didn't agree to anything. If he was trying to put the public pressure on UFC, it didn't work because Dana White said he's not on the show. He's not going to be on the show. Doesn't matter what he tweets. He's not there. It's not happening. And now the real battle is not even over UFC 200 anymore. It's over UFC 205, which is theoretically the number they're giving to the Madison Square Garden show. And he wants to be on that because there's a very large Irish contingent living in the Northeast, living in New York, and he wants to represent for his people. And Dana White is apparently cheesed off enough at him for not being willing to do the press for UFC 200 that they don't seem likely to give him a spot on UFC 205 either.
Now, did you happen to see the street art by one Nate Diaz this week?
I've seen a lot of different things from Nate Diaz, but why don't you tell the listeners what you're talking about?
So, the quote this week is, yes, Diaz is going on vacation. And he posted a picture. It's a wall mural of him bleeding after the fight with the hat, with the line underneath says, I ain't surprised.
And the point is?
I'm not surprised by Conor's, how do I say this? Actions over the past week?
Mm-hmm. His antics, if you will.
Antics, another good word, yes. But you have to look at it this way. Is he building for another fight with Diaz, or is he basically not squashing it, but is he putting an exclamation point on how he feels about Conor McGregor right now?
I think at this point, Nate's ready to move on and find other fish to fry because he already beat the guy he wasn't supposed to beat on short notice. I wouldn't blame Nate for just saying, if he doesn't want to show up, I don't need to have the fight. I can move on. I already beat your poster boy. Give me something else. I would if I was in his shoes.
When did Conor beat Jose for the title? Like that unification fight they had?
That would be last December.
So December, okay. Do you think we will see Conor McGregor in the UFC octagon before December of this year?
I think there's every good chance we will. He's just going to have to settle for whatever they give him because he doesn't get to call the shots now. He's already tried that one too many times. They've clearly had enough of it now, and the backlash has begun. And if he wants to be on a UFC card before the end of the year, they'll tell him when, and they'll tell him where, and they'll tell him what to do to be on that card. And he doesn't get to have a say in it. From this point on, Conor McGregor has to play by their rules or no rules at all.
I think he's got two options here. One, he stays at 145, defends the title, or if he wants a new challenge, maybe he feels bored, why not say, okay, you want to try 155? I'll give you Dos Anjos.
I have to tell you right now that I heard a very interesting theory about that from a fighter I interviewed this week for Titan FC 38. That's going to be on UFC Fight Pass on April 30th. The main event is Steve Carl and Bilal Muhammad. And when I talked to Steve Carl, we discussed Conor McGregor a little bit, and he said he doesn't think Conor is going back to 145.
Really?
Yeah, and I said, so that means he's going to have to vacate the title then. And he said, yeah, I don't see him cutting back down to that weight at this point.
Well, he's not old, but, as far as fighters are concerned, but the longer he stays at 145, do you think there'd be any long-term effects? I mean, cutting down to 145 when we've seen him fight at 170 looking at, I don't know, a little bit healthier?
Yeah, I mean, he always had to make a really hard cut to get to 145 anyway, so I think Steve Carl may have a point when he says that that's not a reasonable cut for him anymore, because Conor got used to being bigger and got used to not having to cut all that excess weight. But at the same time, going from 145 to 170, he obviously is getting into the land of giants at 170, because you got guys that are 6 foot and up who cut down to 170. Maybe he should try 155, to which Steve Carl also told me that may be why he didn't want to fight at 155. Maybe that's why he wants to fight Nate Diaz at 170 both times, because even if he loses at 170, as long as he doesn't lose at 155, he's still relevant there. And if he can't make it at featherweight anymore, he can always try 155.
Well, I can't go any lower than featherweight.
No, you cannot picture him being a bantamweight or a flyweight. There's no way Conor could ever get down to that size unless he started hacking off limbs.
Or maybe, he'll have the exemption and he can do the IV. No, I was kidding. He can't do the IVs. They've stopped doing that. So, I mean, he looks dehydrated at featherweight.
He does until he gets in the cage. I mean, when he's on the scale, he looks drawn out.
I would love to see what he weighs before he steps on that cage. Like, before he climbs up those steps, I wonder what his walkout weight is compared to his weigh-in weight the day before.
Well, I think from a lot of fighters I've talked to recently, if you're walking around anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds above your weight class, the belief is you can make weight when it's time to weigh in. Like, you can be that much over it, like a week out or a week and a half out, and your final week, that's when you really flush your body and get everything out and get all the water out so you can get down to your target weight.
But we've seen before fighters who think, I can cut the weight, no problem, and they go in the sauna with the garbage bag sweatsuit and on the bike, and they lose 2 pounds.
Right, and then we see guys who think they can lose the weight and get so dehydrated that they can't even get on the scale because they're in danger of their kidneys failing and they have to go to the hospital. But, I'm going to say, talking to Darren Cruikshank and talking to Steve Carl has given me more weight to this opinion than I've previously had, because it's one thing to talk about it from our side of it, and it's another thing to talk about it from the fighter's side of it. And there is something to be said for letting a fighter do what a fighter can do. It is fighting after all. It's not like they're playing tiddlywinks. These guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. And if they think they can make a weight, then who are we to tell them not to try to make that weight? If they fail to make the weight, then they've got a problem and they got to reconsider their career at that point. But if they can make the weight and do it in a way that doesn't have long-term deleterious health effects, then let them.
Is Cruikshank still, he's not in UFC anymore?
No, his last fight was Rising FC, or Rising Fighting Federation, whatever the organization in Japan where Fedor had the fight, yeah.
Okay. Alright, well, let's move on. We got 2 big shows to talk about this week, and we got a little bit of news as well at the end of the show, but we have to move on to Benson Henderson's debut in Bellator, and
speaking of welterweights, the guy who normally fights at lightweight, but had his last 2 fights in UFC before he left at welterweight, thought, well, I won 2 fights at welterweight in UFC. I can do the same thing to their welterweight champion. No, you can't.
I'll take bad ideas for 200, Alex.
Yeah, everybody I've talked to since that fight was over all says the same thing. Benson, you're great, but you're too small to be a welterweight.
Well, I mean, there are some interesting fights there, but not against the champ.
No. Andrei Koreshkov manhandled him for 5 rounds. There's no other way to put it. Benson would drop down, try to get the takedown. Koreshkov wouldn't budge. As soon as they'd break, Koreshkov would plaster him. He'd hit him with a shot. He'd spin around, hit him with a kick to the temple. Everything he did would connect. And Benson is about as tough as they get. And we've known this for years now. We've seen him in WEC and UFC prove over and over again he can take a shot. And kudos to him for being that tough. But just because you're that tough and you can't be finished doesn't mean you're winning. And he didn't win a single one of those rounds.
No, absolutely not.
In fact, one of those rounds from one judge was a 10-8. Probably the first round.
Like, I don't think even Cecil Peoples would give Benson a round.
No, I'm looking at that fight at the end, and I'm doing my live recap for MMA Mania. Big plug, MMAmania.com. That's where you'll find my Titan FC interviews this week. But when I looked at the end of that fight and looked at what I had just watched for the last 25 minutes and change, I said, there's no judge in the world who can score this for Benson Henderson. And I've been at fights where Benson shouldn't have been scored the winner and was, but this time it's not going to happen, and it did not.
So, where do you rank Korshakov now? Take him out of the equation right now, out of his promotion. Do you think he is one of the top 170s in MMA right now?
I think if you're making a list of top 15 in the world across all promotions in all regions, he has to be in that top 15.
I'd give him top 5.
I think you could make a case for that. I mean, you'd have to say that Douglas Lima was top 15, and you'd have to say Benson Henderson was top 15, but if you want to make the case for that, I guess I can see it.
But that's a weight class that has been very strong in both UFC and Bellator, and I would not want that job to rank the top 5 fighters in those two promotions because, like, there's some tough hombres there.
And guess who has that job, amigo?
Who's that?
Me, for Wrestling Observer. I have to rank those guys in welterweight every single time there's a UFC show.
Was there any advisory on the last one?
I would have to pull open my email, but if you want me to, I can go ahead and get that for you.
I don't know. Sometimes there's ones that are not shocking, but it's like, oh, he's only going up one spot, or this guy, you know what I mean? Like, there's sometimes where you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, let's see.
Rankings. Well, as Stevie looks that up, we'll move on. Actually, before we move on to the next fight, as you look that up, Stevie, I'm wondering, what do you do with Benson Henderson now in Bellator? Do you have him fight again at 170, or do you think he goes down to 155?
Well, I'm sorry, but right now I'm looking at the rankings brief, so I'm going to have to stick with that for the moment. What do you want to know here? I got John Jones and OSP. I got Demetrius Johnson and Henry Cejudo. I got Pettis and Barboza, Whitaker and Natal, Yair Rodriguez and Andre Fili, Sergio Pettis and Chris Calades, Carla Esparza and Juliana Lima. There was no advisory as far as a welterweight fight.
Okay. But let's move on to what I said about Benson. Do you think he goes to 155 or does he stay at 170?
If he has any chance of being relevant in Bellator, and keep in mind they signed him as the former champion, the big star in UFC, the guy who was still in their rankings as one of their top fighters before he left, then he does need to go to lightweight, because if you can't beat Andrei Koreshkov, you're not going to beat any of the rest of that division.
And you know Bellator better than I do, I'll admit that. Who would you put at 155 against Benson?
Well, the immediate one that you would probably want to see is a rematch with Josh Thompson.
Oh, we've seen that, though.
Yeah, we have, but with a new promotion, different eyes judging, maybe it turns out differently. But right now, Thompson has bigger fish to fry because he's going to fight Michael Chandler, and the winner of that fight probably gets Will Brooks.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't give him Brooks right away, but yeah.
And Brooks did have a comment about that after the fight was over. He said, quote, "I'm available, but it's probably not good for him to take a second loss."
Probably not.
No.
So, a little cocky, though, but...
Well, Will Brooks is always a little cocky. That is his M.O. If you don't like it, you don't, and if you do, you do. I've never had a problem with it.
Is there anybody else besides Thompson?
Well, if you're going to have him go down the ladder and work his way up, then you can put him in there with the guys like Patricky Frere, Brett Primus, the caveman David Rickles. You know, these are fights he could have if you want him to work his way up the ladder to the champ.
I could see him having one fight down the ladder. I don't even know who, but I think he has to build up to Thompson just because I don't want to see that fight right away. I want him to have a couple of fights before he gets like a top tier 155. I want to have like a tune-up fight. You know what I mean?
Right. And Thompson is right at near the top of that ladder right now. Like I said, if he wins that fight with Chandler, he's probably getting Brooks. So, yeah, he's a little further up the chain right now than Benson Anderson. Even though they have history, it probably needs to be a situation where he works his way into contention.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about the co-main event of this card.
Okay. We had a lot of interesting fights on Bellator 153, and if you skip the show in Italy to go to this show, I don't blame you because, quite frankly, this card was a lot more stacked up, although both cards did have Pitbull brothers on them, each one fighting a replacement opponent, and in this case, it was Patricio Freire, who was fighting a replacement opponent for John Teixeira in Henry O.K. Corrales. And poor Corrales has not had a good run in Bellator. This guy has never been given an easy fight. His first fight was Daniel Strauss. He got finished, and Strauss is the champion now, so that tells you that. Then he had Emmanuel Sanchez, the guy that nobody seems to be able to beat because he always takes it to a decision and always gets a split decision. Like every single fight Emmanuel Sanchez has, he comes out the winner in a split decision. It's uncanny. So he gets a third fight, he takes it on short notice, and what does Patricio do to him? He jumps guard in the second round, cranks on that neck, guillotine submission. Once again, Patricio Freire doing what he does. Once again, Henry Corrales getting a tough fight and losing.
We'll actually speak about the next fight, talking about submissions.
This one was completely out of left field. I didn't see it coming. Maybe some other people did. If so, I give them the credit they deserve, because the one thing I did not picture in my mind was this ancient, and I say that with all due respect, ancient fighter in Evangelista Cyborg Santos, a guy who goes all the way back to Pride, would come out there and heel hook Brennan Ward in 30 seconds flat.
Do you think he was training for a heel hook finish here?
He said he was. He claimed he was. In his post-fight interview, he said that he thought that Brennan Ward had a weak foot because he saw him wearing protective shoes at the Rising show that we were just talking about earlier. So he saw that, he thought he was vulnerable, and he went for it, and he got it. So if that's truly his strategy, and he played it, and it worked, then I commend him for it. But I don't even know if that was so much strategy as just magnificent positioning, because when Brennan Ward tried to take it to the ground, he just out-positioned him and immediately got in position for that heel hook.
So one could say he found his Achilles heel?
Wah, wah, wah.
Come on, that was gold.
I suppose, but it was a pretty nasty heel hook, too. He didn't even have a chance to tap out. He verbally...
Hey, but Stevie, when have you ever seen a heel hook that didn't look nasty?
Okay, but I'm saying he didn't have a chance to tap to it. And he was they were competing on the ground trying to get a dominant position, and he just got the better one, and you had no other choice but to scream because you couldn't tap. He just had to give up.
You can make the argument sometimes with a choke, you don't have it on properly or you're not squeezing tight enough, but with heel hooks, if you lock that on, they all look nasty because it looks like it hurts like a sumbitch.
Right. I believe Evangelista Santos said something to the effect of, I was going to take his foot and take it home with me. And that's pretty much how it looked.
We'll speak about another Santos, Glaristone Santos, losing via split decision to Brent Primus.
I didn't see it this way.
No.
No. To me, Santos was the aggressor in the fight. Santos clearly won the first 2 rounds, outstruck him, outworked him. Primus was going for takedowns and not getting them. In the 3rd round, he finally got the one he was looking for and got on top, and I'll give him his credit because he did do some nice ground and pound late in the fight, but I didn't think that was enough to sway the judges. But somewhere, those judges, they actually thought he won one of the other 2 rounds because he got 2 29-28s, and I'm still mystified by that because I had it 29-28 for Santos, and I only gave the 3rd round to Primus because he made a great comeback at the end.
Hey, Glaristone. Hey, Peter H. Glow Up or Shut Up. Nice to meet you. Little advice. Never leave it to the judges.
Well, yeah, this is the 2nd straight time he's been robbed by the judges. Speaking of John Teixeira, that's what happened to him in his last fight. He lost the split decision.
Somebody should send him the clip of, what's his name? George Bush, the son there.
I suppose.
The one before Obama.
Right.
Basically saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you don't get fooled again.
Well, one person that definitely didn't get fooled was Michael Venom Page because Jeremy Holloway ran straight at him to open the fight, and guess what he caught? A right hand. That wasn't the end of the fight, though. Holloway actually recovered from it, and he tried to make a fight out of it, but then he made the mistake of kicking Michael Page in the jimmy. That's not a good idea, because it lit a fire under Page's ass after the restart. He went out there and blitzed him. Holloway went to the ground. Page followed suit. He got a toe hold on him and tapped him out.
So, when he got hit by that right, if you take the start of the fight and watch it up to that point, you can almost have like a comedy soundtrack in the background, like Benny Hill. Because it was just like, da-da-da-da, boom. Like, what are you thinking here? It's Page.
Why?
He's got a nasty right.
Why would anybody run up on Michael Page? You're either going to get socked with a right, hit with a spinning kick to the head, or just crushed in some form. You do not run up on the guy like that.
It reminds me when an opponent will rush Ronda Rousey, and she goes, okay, flip, arm, done.
Exactly. And he had the perfect answer for this after the fight. There was plenty of time for a post-fight interview because this fight was only 2 minutes and change. So he got on the mic, he put on his shades and said, you know, everybody's going to do that now because they're all afraid of me. So they're all going to try to bum rush me early. But I just showed that I got tricks up my sleeve. I got more things that they don't know about. And if you try to rush up on me, you could get knocked out, or I could take it to the ground. I could tap you out. I'll take them anywhere they come.
Well, with Page, he's a very interesting character because I said it before, like, I always like saying, who would you put up against next? But with Page,
we already have the answer. Fernando Gonzalez is next.
Yeah. It's not like it's going to be a long debate.
No, and it's about time, too, because both of these guys should be in contention to get a shot at the champion, and either Fernando Gonzalez puts together his X straight win in a row, or Michael Page remains undefeated and has beaten the guy who's got all those wins in a row. So, one way or another, come July in London, we're going to figure out who the next contender for Koreshkov is.
I don't know if I want to be the next contender for Koreshkov at this point.
It's probably something a lot of people who are thinking they're hot shit should reconsider because, I mean, yeah, I give Fernando all the respect in the world for 5 straight wins. He is a super tough dude. His only loss in that time was in a kickboxing fight, but in straight up MMA, he's got 5 wins in Bellator. So, he's as tough as they come, but I don't know if I'd favor him against the straight up punching power of Koreshkov because Benson Henderson surviving some of the shots he ate and some of the kicks he ate was damn near a miracle. I wouldn't put that to Fernando Gonzalez to walk through those shots, and I definitely wouldn't put that to Michael Page either. As good as he is, if the two of them trade at the same time, I get the feeling Page might actually fold.
Would you save that fight for a tentpole show?
If it turns out to be Page and Koreshkov, I definitely put that on a tent pole.
Yeah.
And it's got to be an international fight, too. It would have to be either in Russia or in London, one or the
You
other.
beat me to it. I was going to say, where would you put that fight? Because that was my next question.
Well, I asked Correspondent if he wants to fight in Russia, and he said yes. He wants to fight in front of his home country, in front of his people. So if Bellator is going to do this international touring thing, then I say if it's Michael Page, you either put it in Russia or London. I don't see any other choice.
Well, maybe you put it in New York.
Well, if you got the right card and you got the right people, maybe you can do that in New York. Maybe say
At the Barclays Center.
If you're going to have a double header, I'm going to put it that way.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a light heavyweight championship unification bout where the winner of King Mo and Phil Davis faces Liam McGeary to unify the title, and then put that in the co-main event, I could see that being a New York card.
All right. Well, is there anything on the prelims you want to talk about, or should we move on to UFC?
I'm trying to remember if there was anything very significant to talk about, because not all of these aired. There were only 3 fights that aired before the card started. I guess of those 3, I would probably point out the light heavyweight fight with Mike Zucchelli and Joe Cronin, because it was one-sided and it was very, very well received with the audience at the Mohegan Sun, because Zucchelli, I don't know if he's exactly from Uncasville, but he's from the area, so they just went absolutely nuts when he got Joe Cronin in a rear naked choke. But Joe Cronin's career record up to that point didn't suggest anything else other than that would happen, but it definitely heated up the crowd for the main card.
Oh, yeah. No, I had the hometown feel for sure.
Yes, indeed. And Chris Honeycutt, he had a one-sided, decisive, and not terribly exciting fight with Matt Secor, but if you're looking at moving him back up the ranks again in welterweight, this one gets him off the prelims and back on the main card, because he won very decisively, 30-27 from 2 judges and a 30-25 from the third, because he just took Secor to the ground over and over again, and Secor couldn't do a damn thing.
All right, well, let's move on to UFC 197. John Jones against OSP for the interim light heavyweight championship. And your interim champion is OSP.
No.
Wait, what?
No, he's not. Not even
Not
close.
OSP?
Speaking of a guy who couldn't do anything to his opponent for the entire fight, Ovince St. Preux really didn't do much of anything. But then John Jones, to the surprise of many people, only did as much as he needed to do. He didn't finish him. He didn't go out there and just ruin him. He won every round decisively, but he didn't completely blow OSP out.
No. No, and the thing is, do you think the fight would have been any different if OSP had a full fight camp?
Maybe. Maybe OSP would have actually won a round in there somewhere. But as I said when we did our preview last week, John Jones is still John Jones. And I think we can all agree that coming into this fight, John Jones was a little bit rusty, and Daniel Cormier certainly thought so on commentary. But even a rusty John Jones was good enough to win a one-sided fight where his opponent didn't win a single round. So I'm not sure OSP putting in a full camp would do that much better with John Jones, rusty or not.
Well, we have John Jones as the interim light heavyweight champion.
Your favorite word. You love interim. I'm going to get you a t-shirt that says #interim and send it to you.
Yeah, right. It's just, we gotta wait longer now for this fight, and
no,
the thing is, Jones didn't really get hurt, though, so do you make the UFC 200 fight?
What was I trying to say when you didn't let me in there? I was trying to say we don't have to wait that long because they're probably going to do it at UFC 200 since Connor's off the card.
Do you rush the fight, though?
I don't think you have to rush. I think John Jones is probably going to want to get back in there and prove that, he had to shake the rust off and now he's back to his old self. And Cormier, looking at this, is going to think, I hope he's still rusty, because then I can go out there and beat the brakes off him. So both of these guys are going to be eager to have this fight.
Now, there were some reports that Cormier at one point was seen backstage in a wheelchair, and then others he was seen normally, not favoring the leg at all. So I'm not sure what state this injury is in at this point.
I really don't care about the backstage rumors at this point, because everything that's ever been said about either of these guys, it doesn't matter when they're in the cage. Even if they have knee issues or arm issues or whatever, there's so much genuine animosity between these two that they don't feel it once they get in the cage. They just go out there and let it fly.
So you're saying it's pure adrenaline once the door is closed?
I think with Daniel Cormier especially, it's nothing but adrenaline. I think John Jones maybe wants to shake that rust off, but I think Daniel Cormier could go in there with 2 blown knees and be like, all right, fucker, let's go.
I have a funny feeling Jones is the favorite.
Of course he'll be the favorite. And if you saw their last fight, why would you think any different?
Yeah, it's all about momentum, and I think Cormier said it best. It's like, I haven't broken the law, I haven't failed any drug tests, and you're cheering him?
Well, everybody loves a bad boy.
Yes, but
look, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not saying it makes sense rationally, but the longest time people were booing John Jones because they thought he was cocky and arrogant and full of himself and just a complete ass of a human being. But once he's gone for long enough and people realize that the king is no longer there and somebody else ascended to his throne and they feel that he's not the rightful ruler, when the king returns, they're going to cheer for the king even if they thought he was an asshat because he's the king.
I know this is not going to be an odds that, we're going to see an MMA odds breaker, but what are the odds, do you think, Stevie, that John Jones stays on the straight and narrow between now and UFC 200?
I think he'll be motivated to not screw up a potential payday of that size. Do I think he'll never screw up again ever? Now, I wouldn't take odds on that bet, but if you ask me to put money on whether or not he's going to make it to UFC 200 without getting in jail again, especially now that he's got a driver, I'd say odds are he'll be fine.
I sense a butt coming.
What do you mean? What butt?
When it comes to the odds of Jones staying clean, I have that.
No, let's distinguish that. I didn't say Jones would stay clean. I said Jones would stay out of trouble. There's a difference.
Can you imagine if Jones, beats Cormier at UFC 200, gets the big payday, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission is like, wait a minute, we have a post-fight drug test here that was a failure. 3 guesses as to who failed the drug test, and Jones gets popped.
It's not outside of the realm of possibility.
Oh.
Honestly, if he's going to prove a point, like I keep saying he wants to prove a point, because you can tell he wasn't happy with his performance. He wanted to go out there and blow out OSB, and he didn't. So he's going to want to prove a point in his next fight. And if he goes out there and wins decisively and fails the drug test, then he didn't prove his point. So my guess is, again, not sure whether or not you want to lay odds on this with MMA Oddsbreaker or anybody else, but he's going to come in there and test clean. Does that mean he's clean? No, but will he do what he needs to? Yes.
Speaking of someone who proved a point in their last fight, DJ versus Cejudo.
This was the more impressive of the 2 title fights, and there are not many times you are going to say that Demetrius Johnson is a better fighter than John Jones, but this is one of those cases because holy shit, did he just destroy Henry Cejudo, the guy that everybody thought, here is the guy who's going to come in, shake up the flyweight division, knock Demetrius Johnson off the throne, knock him down the pound-for-pound list, just change things up, and he got wrecked.
I don't know what you do with DJ. Like, who's he going to fight next? The janitor?
All I can say is he wants to stay there. Let him stay there. He wants to keep dominating at bantamweight, at flyweight. If he wants to keep dominating every flyweight contender they can find for him, then let him. Who's going to tell him no?
Do you think he ever moves up, or do you think he just stays there because he's the man at that class?
I say he stays there. It's not his problem. It's UFC's problem to find him competition. It's not his problem to go out there and prove he's the man at any other weight class because he has totally owned the class that he's in. So make it their responsibility to find people to fight him. In fact, make that the selling point because they've had so much trouble making a selling point with him that people should buy his pay-per-views. Now you've got it. Now that he just destroyed Henry Cejudo in 2 minutes and 49 seconds, that's what you market him as. You market him as the most dominant champion in UFC today. Because who else can you say that about? Ronda Rousey? Nope, she lost. John Jones? He's been out for a while, and there's still questions to answer. Chris Weidman? Well, he lost to Luke Rockhold. Who is the most dominant champion they have right now? Demetrius Johnson. You put that on the poster. You say he's number one with a bullet. Nobody can beat him. Watch the man who stands on top of the throne vanquish all comers. You market him like they marketed Mike Tyson back in the day. This guy's unstoppable. Watch him ruin people.
I'm just going over other champions at flyweight. You've got Magomed Bilibilitov at World Series. And you got Demetrius Page.
With all due respect to both of them, they would not even stand a chance. But then again, that's why you would do it. Just send them in there and let them get wrecked.
In CFFC, their champion of flyweight is Louis Gadnot.
Yeah, he's not going to do any better than either of them.
No. He would not, but I'd be interested to see him against Bilibilitov.
I mean, you can put any of those guys in any combination with each other, and it's interesting, but once you put him in there with Demetrius Johnson, you just say, here's the bottom line, folks. You're paying to see DJ destroy somebody. Whether he does it in the first round or the fifth round, he's going to do it. That's what you sell. You bottle you sell it.
You're right. I mean, as far as title defenses, he's now up to 8 title defenses. 8.
Yeah, he's chasing that record. He's chasing that Anderson Silva record, and he might get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hell of a thing to put on your mantle, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So again, why does he have to prove anything by going up to bantamweight? That's what John Dodson did because he already got beat twice, so he knew a third time was not going to come, and he just said, okay, I'm moving up. And so far, it's worked out for him.
The only current champion I can find on this list of all the weight classes that has like a steady string of defenses successfully is Trevor Prangley, having 6 straight title defenses for KOTC in light heavyweight. That's the only one I can find that comes close to DJ, and I'm really digging to find someone who has more than 5 title defenses right now currently in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, you went to Trevor Prangley, and that's not disrespecting him, but King of the Cage is not Bellator, and Bellator is not UFC, and that's that.
Exactly. Now, with the judo, sometimes I say you learn more from a loss than a win.
Oh, Steve Carl said that to me when I interviewed him. In fact, he told me the 2 fights he learned the most from were losing to Douglas Lima and losing to Usmar Palhares. Everything he needed to know he got from those 2 losses. So
what do you do with the judo now as far as, do you take some time off? Do you go right back to training? What do you do here?
I think if you're Cejudo, what you take away from this, besides the fact that you got to get back in training and regroup, is that when you do train, don't just worry about your wrestling, because he took DJ down. That's not the issue. He proved he can do it. The problem is, what do you do when DJ gets back up? Because he got back up and he wrecked him. So you got to learn all the other things that don't come with an Olympic medal for wrestling. You gotta learn your takedown defense, you gotta learn your striking defense, you gotta learn your submission defense, you gotta get all those other things polished up before you get back in there with DJ again.
Well, I take some time. I wouldn't go right back to training. Take a month off. Recharge your batteries, because in this sport you need some time just to absorb the loss and just try to focus and then hit that gym, hit those pads again, and be good to go.
I agree. He could take some time off. He can regroup, but if you're DJ, you don't need to, because you just had an easy night's work. And he also got a very nice Reebok bonus.
I'm sure he did.
$40,000.
All right, let's move on to Edson Barboza and Anthony Pettis.
What happened to Showtime? Not
I
talking
think it's
about...
always a focus.
Yeah, we're not talking about the premium channel that you pay extra for in your cable bill. We're talking about Pettis just not being the guy he used to be.
Steve, can't believe I'm going to say this.
You're going to say
Do you
he's
think
done?
we'll see Showtime go to Bellator?
Well, if he keeps losing like this, he's going to have to come up with some other plan, because this is not looking good for him. He's sliding down the rankings, and deservedly so. He lost to Barboza, he lost to Alvarez, he lost to Dos Anjos. I mean, it's a rough road for him to even begin to consider making a comeback after 3 losses like that, because now, when you look at him in the rankings and you say, what are you going to do with this guy? He's all the way down to number 7. And Barboza moves ahead of him by right, as he should. He's number 6. And then ahead of him in the pecking order, you got Donald Cerrone, Tony Ferguson, Eddie Alvarez, Habib Nurmagomedov. At this point, with the way Pettis has lost in 3 straight fights, where he's either gotten crushed or he's just looked listless and almost apathetic, how are you going to say he's going to beat any of those other guys? Like, at this point, I'm looking at El Kukui going, Ferguson would wreck him.
I ask about Bellator because, I mean...
Well, there's one reason he probably doesn't want to leave. His brother is in UFC, and he was also on this card.
He was, and we'll talk about him in a second, but, I mean, if he goes to Bellator, there's a fight waiting for him there.
I would agree with you. There is probably several fights waiting for him there, but I'm going to cut this short because I don't want to go too long with this show, but he's got to stay with it until they let him go. He can't just go to Bellator at this point off 3 losses, because every shark in that 155 division in Bellator would want to eat him.
Oh, yeah. All right, Robert Whittaker beating Rafael Natal and Yair Rodriguez beating Andre Fili. I was impressed with Rodriguez's knockout here in the second round.
Yeah, it was a very impressive performance, and it got him a nice spot in the featherweight rankings as well. So, all things considered, a very beautiful performance for Yair Rodriguez, who cracks in at number 14. And also, speaking of cracking, he definitely cracked Touchy-Feely with that flying head kick.
Brutal.
Yeah, that's the way to make a highlight reel. And you didn't say anything about Whittaker's performance, but that was a ranking fight, and that was a very solid performance on Whittaker's part. I think that one definitely proves he's ready to hang with the guys that are above him, and those guys are Bisping, Belfort, Souza, and Weidman. You want to give him a fight with one of those kind of guys going forward.
Who gave 1 round to Natal in that fight?
I don't know, but it wasn't me.
No. The prelims were all decisions. Pettis, Roberts, Esparza, and Vick are your winners.
Yeah, I guess, all these fights they had something going for them. I think Vick probably looked the best out of anybody on the prelims, but like you said, they're all decisions.
Now, as far as the Fight Pass ones are concerned, we mentioned Walt Harris and Cody East was a fight you were looking forward to.
Well, I knew Cody East had his UFC looking for a fight entry into this pay-per-view card because Dana White thought he was something special. But Dave East also had, or Cody East, pardon me, had a troubled past before he got this fight. And Walt Harris gave him some trouble. TKO. It only took 4 minutes, 18 seconds.
Yeah. Now, what happened to Clint Hester?
I wish I could tell you, but Rogerio de Lima had his number on this night and choked him out clean.
Arm triangle choke. That's if that's done properly, that's a nasty choke there.
Absolutely. You gotta get it on while you're in half guard, and once you make that pass to side, if they're not prepared for it, you're done.
I mean, once he saw him starting to go to side, if you're the fighter there in that position, you're thinking, oh crap, do I have time to block it? And you already see him already on the go before you can react, like, ah, shit, here we go.
Yeah, you gotta smell it coming before he goes to side, because once he gets there, most guys are gonna end up tapping, especially if it's put on right.
Alright, well, that's Kevin Lee beating Efren Escudero.
Escudero seemed to think he won this fight. I don't
No!
know why he thought that.
What was he smoking? Sorry, wrong thing to say about a UFC fighter, but what are you smoking thinking you won that fight?
Yeah, it was closer with the judges than it was with me.
Yeah, exactly. As far as news goes, I mean, we talked a lot about Conor at the start there, but there is something interesting coming out of the medical suspensions from UFC 197. OSP broke his arm.
Yeah, checking one of those head kicks that John Jones threw.
So it goes to show you the power of those kicks. Talk about power of the punch. This is power of the kicks.
That's very true. I mean, it's the same thing we saw way back in the day when Chuck Liddell and Rich Franklin fought each other, because there was one head kick that got checked that left him with a broken arm, that if the fight had continued, Chuck Liddell probably would have won that fight by a TKO.
Absolutely. As far as news is concerned, there are a few points I want to touch on. One is Paddy Holohan retiring.
Yeah, he has a rare blood disorder. I believe it's called Factor 13, but he had previously kept it secret, and I'm not sure how, considering they do medical screenings for your fights, but
Yeah.
he had managed to keep it from the UFC up until now, and they finally found out about it, and he said, they're not going to medically qualify me for a fight from this point on, so I have to retire. What choice do I have?
So Willie Gates has a new opponent for his fight at UFC Fight Night 87. It's Ulka Sasaki, a fighter we haven't seen in 11 months.
Yep, he's going to come back, he's going to take the fight, and best of luck to him.
So we get that going there, and Paige Van Zandt, I checked this week, still on Dancing with the Stars.
I believe she got 28 out of 30 for her routine this week.
Well, good for her. If she can continue do you think she'll win?
I think she was kind of a ringer to win because she already had a background as a dancer before she got into fighting.
Thiago Alves will be fighting at lightweight in his next fight.
What's his opponent?
No idea who, but he's moving down to lightweight.
All right, well, good luck to him.
Scott Coker believes some veterans from the UFC would, make it to Bellator, and he dropped a very interesting name.
Well, are you going to tell
Corey
us?
McDonald.
I don't know about that.
That's fishing. That's a big net there. I don't know.
Right. I mean, I know Rory said that he wants to test the waters in free agency, but testing means exactly that. You're fishing to see who will give you more, and I can't see Bellator outbidding UFC for him.
No. A fight's been added to the Tough 23 finale as Stevie Ray, not Stevie J, Stevie Ray, fights Jake Matthews.
And you're not talking about the brother of Booker T either.
Nope, no slapjack here.
No. No fruity booty.
No, but Jake Matthews, that's a good fight.
Should be a great fight.
And, DJ, we talked about the paydays for, the deal before in the past about certain fighters getting checks based on, like title history, experience, you know what I mean? Like the more fights you have, the more the pay will be, right?
Right. That's why he collected such a nice bonus, because he's been around for a while.
222,500.
Well, that's his total payout.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that also includes a performance of the night. He and Yair Rodriguez both got those bonuses.
And I have one last thing here. It's actually a quote from Daniel Cormier. This will make you laugh, Stevie.
Mm-hmm.
If this is the new John Jones, there's no way that guy can beat me.
Well, that's his opinion. He's entitled to it, but the fight's the fight. We'll see what happens when they face.
It's like putting gas on the fire. It's going to be a great trash-talking session until the fight. I hope they... I don't want to say overhype it, but you don't really have to promote it that much. It built itself.
By the way, you said 225 for DJ. I got 195 on my list.
Okay. Well, I got 222,500, so...
I got 195, including a $60,000 win bonus.
Still...
It's a good chunk of change no matter which way it goes.
Are you surprised
nobody's beating John Jones, because he got a cool $500,000, and he probably gets $1 on every pay-per-view buy on top of that, so he's sitting pretty.
I'm going to ask you one question here, and it didn't happen at this show, but you've got a very extensive history in music, correct?
I'd say that's a fair supposition.
Is there one Prince song that you would pick as an entrance theme as an MMA fighter?
How about I Would Die For You?
Really?
Why not?
Well,
It's up-tempo. It
is.
It's got a reference to being willing to go out and make a sacrifice. So what do fighters do? They go out there and sacrifice their bodies.
See, I would make more of a jubilant entrance theme. I'd come out to 1999.
I don't think it's a party when you're in there in the octagon.
No, but you can always, if you're take care of business and then you party.
If you're going to do that, you might as well make it Little Red Corvette, because then you can drive away in a nice car after you win.
What was the song from the Batman movie?
All I remember is, do, get the funk up, Batman. That's the one I remember.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the show this week. Stevie, you mentioned an interview for MMA Mania. Is that going to be on your YouTube channel?
Yes, indeed. One of them already is, and one of them is forthcoming. So go ahead and check out the Steve Carl one right now as you're listening to this. And by the time you're done with this show, it'll probably have the Bilal Muhammad interview up too. So youtube.com/AngryMarks.com.
What's on tap for Thursday night AMP?
Previewing Payback. It's Sunday. It's on the WWE Network.
Oh, crap, that's this weekend, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Huh. All right, well, yeah, all I got to say for my plugs is check out the other shows on the network, and, it's going to be a nice week off from fights, except for Titan FC. Go check out those guys this weekend, but as far as the big boys are concerned, next week's show, we will preview the big show in the Netherlands.
Rotterdam.
That's going to be an interesting show for sure, and I like it when they go to a new city for the first time. I don't know how many more we're going to get this year. I know we have one coming up here in June, but it's always nice to go to a different venue, a different layout. You know what I mean? Like, it all can't be in Vegas.
All I know is that anywhere they had that fight in the Netherlands, Alistair Overeem would be the conquering hero. The reaction he's going to get will be gigantic.
Maybe if UFC ever did a show in Russia and had Fedor, I know it would never happen, but you got to think that's one guy, like Overeem, that reaction he's going to get in the Netherlands. He's going to get it.
It'll be like what Alexander Gustafsson got in Sweden.
God, yeah, there you go.
It'll be that big.
Yeah. All right, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.